Some thoughts return quietly, and the strange thing is, they don't ask for attention. I used to think that if something came back, it meant it wasn't resolved. I used to believe repetition meant failure. I assumed that returning thoughts were unfinished work, but they weren't. Not loudly, not urgently, just quietly enough to be noticed again. There was no dramatic memory attached to them, no clear event demanding review, no sudden emotional wave. It was smaller than that. It was consistent. It was subtle. It was familiar. From the outside, nothing seemed different. I still moved through my day. I still answered when someone spoke. I still did what needed to be done. Nothing about me looked preoccupied, and yet something would surface again. Not suddenly, not disruptively, just quietly enough to exist beside everything else. I noticed it in the pauses between tasks, the second where my mind drifted, the moment before sleep, the silence after a conversation ended. A thought would return, not demanding resolution, not asking to be solved, just there. That used to unsettle me. I used to assume that if something returned, it meant I had missed something, overlooked something, failed to close something properly. But this time felt different. The thought didn't arrive with urgency. It didn't arrive with accusation. It didn't arrive with pressure. It simply reappeared, and I let it. I was still present, still aware, still steady, but I wasn't chasing it. The thought came without interrogation. It stayed without explanation. It faded without ceremony. And nothing broke. I could move through an entire afternoon with something quietly circling in the background, and it didn't interfere with anything. Nothing felt reopened. Nothing felt undone. It was more like recognition without drama. As if a part of my mind was revisiting something not to fix it, but to sit beside it again. Everything around me stayed the same, but the way I responded to repetition had shifted. I paid attention to how calm I remained. I didn't tense when it surfaced. I didn't brace against it. I didn't prepare for emotional fallout. If someone had asked what I was thinking about, I might not even have mentioned it, because it wasn't a problem. That was the new part. I had always believed returning thoughts meant unfinished business, that repetition meant something was wrong, that closure meant disappearance. But what if return doesn't mean failure? What if it simply means familiarity? I noticed it in repetition, the same images, the same questions, the same fragments of memory, everything recognizable, yet softer, not because I had erased them, but because I had stopped resisting them. I didn't dissect the thought. I didn't analyze its origin. I didn't demand a new conclusion, and nothing intensified. That awareness changed something, because once you stop fearing what comes back, you begin to see it differently. I began to notice how much of my discomfort had come from expecting permanence, from believing that healing meant disappearance, from assuming that growth meant never revisiting the same space. If something returned, I assumed I had regressed. If a question resurfaced, I assumed I had failed to understand it the first time. If a memory came back, I assumed it still had power over me. But none of that was true. The returning thought didn't control me. It didn't demand action. It didn't insist on a new interpretation. It simply passed through again. That realization didn't feel dramatic. It felt grounding, like seeing a familiar street twice and recognizing it without needing to explore it again. Like hearing a song you once loved and letting it play without attaching meaning to it. Like allowing repetition without turning it into a warning sign. And the more I allowed that, the less threatening the return felt. Everything continued as usual. Time moved forward. People spoke. The world kept its rhythm, and I moved within it without interpreting every resurfacing thought as a setback. I noticed it in my breathing, in the way my body stayed relaxed, in the absence of urgency. The thought would come, and I would let it sit there. No debate, no correction, no internal argument. That was unfamiliar. The schedule made sense. The responsibilities remained. The day unfolded normally. But something inside me had changed. Not the thoughts themselves, but my relationship to them. Even simple repetitions felt different. A question returning, a memory resurfacing, an emotion revisiting quietly. The pressure was gone. I didn't need every recurring thought to signal unresolved pain, and that awareness was subtle. It wasn't a breakthrough. It wasn't a final closure. It was quiet. And because it was quiet, it felt stable. Sometimes I noticed how automatic my resistance had been, how quickly I labeled repetition as regression, how urgently I tried to prevent old thoughts from reappearing. And now I wasn't guarding against them. I didn't explain it to anyone. There was nothing dramatic to report, but I carried a new softness with me through the same rooms and the same hours, aware that return does not equal failure. There was nothing to fix, no emotional emergency to resolve, no hidden wound reopening. The thought came, and I remained steady. It moved with me in small ways, in the silence before sleep, in the pause before a response, in the space between breaths. I let it exist without turning it into a problem. I didn't force insight. I didn't demand closure. I didn't chase explanation. I let it sit there quietly as something that had permission to revisit. The strange thing was how little it disrupted me. People still spoke the same way. My routine still held together. My life still moved forward. Nothing unraveled. Nothing collapsed. And yet, something inside me had softened its fear of repetition, as if I had mistaken return for weakness, not a dramatic shift, not a visible transformation, just less resistance. The thought didn't grow louder, it didn't demand resolution, it simply returned. And maybe that was the point. Some thoughts return quietly, not to be solved, not to be conquered, just to be seen again, not loudly, not urgently, just steadily. Nothing around me needed to change. Nothing needed to be re-examined for me to remain stable. I didn't need every recurring thought to disappear. I simply continued, aware that some thoughts return because they are part of me. Some thoughts return quietly, and that doesn't mean something is wrong.